What a brilliant day we are having here at the Global Business of Data Festival. We are now joined by a panel of amazing thought leaders to talk through the big debate of decentralized or hybrid data platforms for 2022. Now, please remember this is live, so you can get your questions in via the question tab on the right-hand side of your screen, but do get them in nice and early so I have the chance to ask them whilst we are live on air. Now, if my amazing panel would like to join me up on stage, we have such a diverse range of speakers joining me from a plethora of industries, which is super exciting. Always makes for a really interesting discussion for sure. And I think for the benefit of the audience is if we begin by just doing a quick round of introductions of who you are and what your current role is. Andy, I wonder if you kick off for me first.
Sure. My name is Andy Kenna. I'm head of data at Renaissance Reinsurance. I've been focusing for the past few years on shaping our data strategy, and the past year building out a team to execute on the strategy.
Amazing. Andy, thank you for joining us today. Lindsay, welcome to the festival.
Hi, thanks, Catherine. I'm Lindsay Mason, and as of 11 weeks ago, I'm the head of data management, governance and capability development at Defence Digital Chief Data Office for the UK MOD.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on the new role. I'm so glad we could get you in so early in that. Keen to hear your insights into this as you begin that exciting new journey. Thank you. Juan, welcome to the festival. If you could give us an intro, please.
Hello, Catherine. Of course, my name is Juan Iglesias. I am Chief Data Officer at Capital Energy, which is an emergent but powerful player of the renewable energy landscape in Spain.
Amazing. Thank you, Juan. Kate, lovely to see you again. An intro, please.
Hi, yes, hi everyone. My name is Kate Sargent. I'm the SVP Head of Data and Analytics at Collinson Group. So we provide travel-related loyalty propositions to the financial services sector across a broad range of global clients.
Amazing. And then last but certainly not least, Jason, if you wouldn't mind giving us an intro.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jason Bunce. I've been 28 years at Colgate-Palmolive, and most of that time on the business side, so customer service and logistics lead, etc. But recently I've helped develop and now lead the supply chain analytics enablement team, where we're tasked with providing data foundations, visualization foundations, but also enabling the organization to do their best in analytics.
Amazing. So as I mentioned there at the top of the session, a nice diverse range of people joining us to really add some flavour into this discussion. Now, just a reminder that get those questions in nice and early so that we can weave them into the pre-planned questions that we are going to dive into now. Now, given that we are talking about kind of decentralized versus hybrid, or kind of maybe a combination of potentially doing both in your organisation, depending on the size, I think it's easiest for the sakes of the audience is if we go around the room and say which platform approach you're currently taking, and then we'll dive into the why in a moment's time. But just for the sense of a check, Andy, where are you currently?
So we're moving towards decentralized. So we're big fans of data mesh. So as part of that, it's domain-oriented ownership of data. So data staying really close to the business domain. So such decentralized teams then publishing data for reviews.
Amazing, thank you. So it's one point to decentralized. Lindsay, how about yourself?
So due to the nature of what we do, I think we're always going to be an amalgamation of hybrid and decentralized. Obviously, we've got a really complex data estate, lots of legacy and history there as well.
Absolutely. Kate?
Yeah, so we're moving towards a centralized platform, but with what I would call a sort of a hybrid or embedded user base. So probably centralized platform, but hybrid usage, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, our ambition is for a hybrid data platform with a single data warehouse. We're on that journey, but yeah, that's the ambition.
Amazing. And then Juan?
We have definitely a centralized right now data platform, hybrid, but mostly centralized. Although, like much of people in the industry, we would like to eventually move to some sort of data mesh approach, but it is too early for us at the time.
Amazing. So nice diverse range of industries, thought leaders and approach. And then we've got a diverse range of platform approaches as well, which makes this conversation wonderful because it means we can dive into each and kind of weigh up the pros and cons. So we'll go back around the room. Andy, you mentioned there about data mesh. Obviously, you and I spoke together on the Business of Data podcast some months ago about this approach. And I wonder for the audience, if you can dive a bit deeper into the work that you've been doing and moving towards that kind of data mesh decentralized approach.
So, yeah, I guess just to touch on why we went with the data mesh approach, our data landscape has changed significantly in the past 6 or 7 years. So our company has grown through organic growth and through acquisitions. So with that, our data volumes have grown significantly. We're now across multiple clouds. We've significant amount of data on AWS, on Azure, and on-premise as well. We have more and more requests for insights across our data, which, as you can imagine, across the different platforms is quite complex. So we went about looking for a solution to that, and we thought we'd go down the path of data virtualization, which basically like a tool to the top of our data so that we could query it, combine our data and get some insights from that. Around that time, our internal operating model was changing, where we were having more longer running squads aligned to domains, and the combination of the domain aligned squads, our approach with data virtualization, that married up really well with what we had read and what we'd studied on the data mesh approach made popular by Shamak Degani. So yeah, we've been on that data mesh journey now for the past 12 to 18 months.
Thank you, Andy. And Juan, I'm going to come to you because you mentioned there in your introduction that it's very much kind of an ambition of yours, and it's a case of not being potentially mature enough to do that yet. So where are you on that journey compared to what Andy just said there?
Yeah, so we've been in this journey for a year and a half, but the company itself is pretty young. So I think to implement the data mesh, which I think is a really nice approach, looks very nice, and it would be great to be able to implement it. But I think it requires certain maturity in the organization. It requires that you have business units with people with that skill and knowledge to treat the data. They require a certain level of independence, and our job would be to provide some governance and to provide the tools so that they can be independent. But at the moment, since we're trying to create this data strategy from zero, from scratch, and we don't have so many people in the organization that really understand how or have knowledge and skill on how to do data management, what we're doing is trying to provide the centralized approach, especially from a, say, technological point of view. Then you could have the different points to enter the data. No? So, but from the we are with Google Cloud. We are a mono cloud. We don't want to add complexity to our IT landscape. So we're just working with Google, which is a great partner in this sense, and they have one of the best data capabilities in the hyperscalers. And this is what we're going around, making available data in a centralized platform, and then governing the permissions for users to be able to access 2 different ways to what they can access, but we manage the entire, let's say, data ecosystem and data ingestion pipelines from the operational systems to our cloud data warehouse data lake.
So you're almost in this process then of increasing the data literacy before you can then kind of give over that additional access and capabilities. So you very much wanting to be walking before you're running, I would assume from that. Correct.
I think that's a key point for people who are listening to us, that don't try to write too fast. If I would give an advice, don't rush it. It's important to go step by step and provide the tools for the business to be able to get acquainted with what they can do and do it safely and securely from a governance standpoint.
Yeah. Brilliant takeaways there. Thank you, Juan. Now, Lindsay, you mentioned there about the challenge of legacy. There'll be many people in our audience that will be very much appreciating that challenge as well. And you've got a bit of a mix going on here. I wonder if you could dive a bit deeper into the approach and kind of what you're looking at currently as you begin into this exciting new role.
Yeah, I will dive in very shallowly, shall we say, given my level of knowledge at 11 weeks in. But I think where we're at is based on a lot of historic choices. We are looking to move to a cloud first approach. We are in the process of trying to rationalize our estate, though, generally, because we've got, as you can imagine, thousands of tools across defense. The other complexity, I think, for us is that it can often be difficult for us to choose what we want regards to our technology and the landscape. because everything we do needs to be run through open and fair competition, and we need to demonstrate that everybody's had an equal chance. So I think some of the ideologies that others have talked about, that's our aspiration as well, but we've got quite a long way to go, but we've got the history to overcome, coming from the opposite end of the extreme there.
Yeah, for sure. A very big challenge. And as you say, only 11 weeks in. So still very an exciting challenge, I hope, for you as well. Kate, talk to me a bit about the platform approach you've taken and why you've chosen to go down that route.
Yeah, and I think probably just echoing some of the comments that have been made already so far. So we have, we're a relatively complex organisation. So we divide along product lines with multiple products, and we also divide along regional lines in the way that we are set up. And so we do have legacy data footprints across some of those products and some of those regions. So our ambition is to create this single data platform for the purposes that, for example, Juan was talking about around single ownership for data governance, or oversight for data governance, I should say, ensuring that one group of people has overall oversight for access to our data and is applying a consistent set of data governance and data quality rules, that we have one set of technology at the base of some of those, applying some of those data quality checks and oversight pieces as well. And from a budgetary perspective, to keep all that tech stack ultimately in one place has certain efficiencies from a technology perspective. But we are still maintaining that access within the product sort of ownership groups and within the regional ownership groups, because those groups are closest to the stakeholders. So we are sort of decentralizing the tooling that sits at the top of the stack, our BI tooling, analytics tooling, etc., within those regions and those products. So we're trying to find that hybrid balance between central oversight and governance and a consistent set of processes, but then allowing that flexibility of usage within the regions. But we are on a journey, of course, as well, from legacy technology, but also legacy culture. So it is, probably for many people as much about evolving ways of working and the way that we do things and creating visibility around expectations, as it is around physically moving technology.
So really trying to tap in, as you say there, to the best of both worlds, where you've got that agility and flexibility, but then also kind of that more structured regulatory policy approach as well, to make sure there's a certain standard just being met by everyone. Brilliant. Then Jason, what's your thoughts on the current take that you are choosing to go down in terms of platform?
Yeah, so you've probably just taken the words out of my mouth between you and Kate there. So, we're consistently looking to satisfy the sustainable, clean data sets with the governance, etc., which is our typical centralized approach, I guess. But at the same time, we realise that we've got to support the business with more agile data sets that don't require a multi-year journey, and it's then a question of providing a platform that supports that, and horses for courses about how that data is then is used. So there's a lot there then in terms of communication to make sure that people know the appropriate data sets to use for the appropriate analytics.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to stick with you, Jason, because you mentioned there in your introduction, a number of years coming from the business side into data. What is it from the business side in that experience that you've had? What are the sorts of capabilities that you're thinking about when it comes to a data platform? So kind of keeping the business hat on, what do you need from them, and how's that kind of influenced your work going forwards?
Yeah, so as I say, it's a balance. We need that central data. We need that highly governed data to be able to do the analytics that require the corporate reporting, the reporting to the street, anything that is appropriate for that. But it's also the case that if we're looking at trends of data or something like that, there may be dirtier data sets, let's say, that are fit for purpose, and we need the ability for teams to be able to get that data on a platform, to be able to do ETL on that data, do the visualizations, and then critically to be able to share it appropriately. I've had a number of occasions where we've been able to get sort of 3 steps along there, and then haven't been able to share widely the data, the analytics that we've created, which is like having a new toy and no batteries. So in the way that we visualize it at Colgate, we've actually tiered both our analytics data and our analytics capability into 3 tiers. We call it Town Planner, Settler, and Pioneer, and we communicate around that. So the Town Planner is the central, highly governed data sets that we're used to, and the analytics that are available globally at a touch of a button. At the other end, the Pioneer stuff is the really dirty data that an end user can create themselves and work with, but knowing the fact that whilst it's agile, it's certainly not sustainable and may not be fully alongside corporate guidelines, etc. But we're happy to have a little bit of anarchy. A little bit of anarchy drives some change, and we just need to put some framework around that. And then the settler solutions try to build that balance in between. So the first thing that defines a settler solution is that we've got sustainability in place. So there is an owner of that, and that owner is not an individual, but part of a process, so that if they leave or whatever, we're covered. So the first thing is sustainability. And then we've got approval by global process owners to say, yes, that analytics is fit for purpose for what it's to be used for. So it has compromises over the central data sets, but it also allows you to run something up a little bit quicker and not to have to wait for all the checks and balances. So that's how we're working.
Wonderful. I love that. Some great sound bites in there. A little bit of anarchy driving change. What a great sound bite. Thank you, Jason. Now, in two sessions ago, we were joined by Neil from MasterCard, and we were talking about kind of what it takes to have a really successful company acquisition from a data perspective. And I really loved the scorecards and the list of questions that he was working through in the process to enable success, right? And I want to kind of bring that into this discussion. What are the list of questions that you would be asking yourself as you go on this journey towards decentralizing or hybrid or whatever it is that you are working towards? What are the most important considerations that you need to make when it comes to data capabilities, what it can do with regarding to the platform that you can go with? I really want our audience to be able to see from your perspective, your thought process in that journey. So maybe 2 or 3 kind of top things that you want to be considering when it comes to choosing the right direction for you. Lindsay, I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking that one first.
Sure. I think we are trying where possible to move towards industry standards. I think we've had a history of doing defence specific and bespoke capabilities, and we're conscious that has to some degree been to our detriment, makes things difficult for us. There's obviously reasons why we need that on occasions. I think that the kind of the core kind of foundations for us that enable us to move to where we need to get to need to be around building our governance capabilities, as others have spoken about. So we're looking even right back to our kind of centralized data catalog and curation tooling and capability to kind of underpin everything that we want to do from an architecture perspective.
Amazing, thank you, Lindsay. Juan, how about yourself when it comes to those top considerations that you are going to be thinking through in this process?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues here. I'm just going to say a few things, not all that apply, but I'm sure the rest of the people will complete it for me. For me, it's important that the platform is scalable. Of course, I mean, we are working in this world now where you're going to have to scale at some point. So creating small solutions will fit the purpose for a bit, but then you will stack. So I think it's very important that you find some sort of, this is maybe a technological, but also a process-wise thing that you can scale your solution. Very important also that it's simple. Also relates a bit to the scalability. If you want your end users, your business users to be able to use the platform, it has to be simple. When talking to a colleague of mine the other day, I was making a comparison about this with the cars. I feel like things are going to get more and more simple because the complexity is hidden in the back. Like I'm sure some of you remember the days where you could just change your car battery because it was just simple. You could open the thing and just remove it and put something new. Now nobody dares to do that because you have to plug several cables. The thing's hidden. It's not meant to be done because the complexity is hidden is behind it, and you don't have to do that. It's done for you somehow. So I think that is also a very important part of it, that users find it simple. It's simple to use the platform, and transparent. It has to be transparent. It's not always good that you just find the data there and you don't know where it comes from. Then it's difficult sometimes for a business user to understand what is it that he's looking at, right? So it has to be nicely labeled, and you would have to have some sort of lineage transparency telling you what is this that you're looking at, what does it come from, when it was last updated, who's looking after it, right? In case you have to ask questions about it to someone else who is the domain expert about that.
Amazing. So scale, simple, and then transparency. Really, really great thoughts there, Juan. Thank you so much. Kate, what are you considering?
Again, probably just to echo what's kind of already been said, but from a slightly different perspective, perhaps. So for me, it is all about finding that sweet spot between sort of governance on the one hand, but flexibility and value creation on the other. So if it was, I would aim to effectively establish a balanced scorecard where we're continually improving our visibility and performance across quality, completeness, recency, access from a sort of governance point of view, and continuously improving those metrics, but at the same time also wanting to see our stakeholder base and our user base being able to get more and more value from that platform as well, and being able to extract new insights and use the data in different and increasingly valuable ways. So I think if you can find that sweet spot where both of those ends of the seesaw, if you like, continuing to improve, then you're on the right track. But for me, it is that's a really hard balance to find, but the right set of metrics would allow you to make sure that you're at least trying and continuing to optimize that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, actually. It is about it's not just increasing the value of what you're currently doing, but finding new value. I think that's such a really, really great point there. Thank you, Kate. Andy, how about yourself? Obviously quite far ahead in this data mesh journey compared to many in the audience and here as well. So what are you really considering as you move into this direction?
Again, as Kate said, it's probably a lot of
I believe you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can.
Cool. Yes, Kate said it's quite similar to what the group has been saying, but I guess just a different slant on it. So accessibility is huge for us. So you want to make data accessible. We don't want to make it prescriptive that to access, this piece of data, you need to go into this report. We want to really have our data being able to access. Despite us going for this decentralized model, we want anybody to be able to come in and access the data from any tool of their choice. So we're not prescribing you need to use this report or this cube or this piece of technology. It's whatever analysts want to come in to use. And likewise, then the data that we're exposing, it's interoperable, and that's going to be a large area of focus for us for the forever in reality. And then we wanted, with its simplicity, we want it to be understood. So part of what we're doing with our data mesh, like one of the principles, data is a product, and really what that means is that it's like a luxury data set with all the trimmings around it. So it's documented, it's well understood, it's cataloged, there's examples for how to use it, there's connections. So if you want to come in and Power BI report, there's sample connections, there's sample SQL, there's Jupyter Notebook connections. It's making the barrier very low to entry. So it's really just simplifying that access. But with that as well, the other big thing for us is governance. So we want the data ultimately to be trusted. So having the data trustworthy is just of paramount importance to us. We need to make sure that security is in place so that people can access only the data they're meant to access. That's huge. But then when you access the data, that they can trust it. It's got quality, there's governance in place. So we've got data owners and stewards, and we've got our data governance framework that's in place. And one of the points I'd make as well, I think what's common, whether we're going centralized, decentralized, or hybrid, it's a lot of them are quite similar in that we're looking to have a centralized governance function that's going to enable others, so ultimately to make it decentralized. That's how we think about it, but others might say, well, that's just centralized. So I think it feels like it's probably more of a scale than you're hard on centralized, hybrid, or decentralized. So yeah, accessibility and governance are the big things for us.
Yeah, great piece about the quality as well, because as you mentioned there, it's one thing having access to it, but are you having access to actually really good quality data that you can do something with and then trust the decisions and results from that? A really good point. And I do agree with what you're saying there about it is a scale as opposed to kind of sitting in one camp or the other, which we clearly heard today from the panel. It's very much that. Thank you, Andy. Now, Kate, you mentioned something earlier which made me smile, which is you confess this is quite hard to do, and I think there can be a tendency when you come to these sorts of events and everyone's kind of talking about what they're doing, and it's like, oh my goodness, you can feel quite overwhelmed in the audience because you're thinking, I'm really struggling with this one bit. So I'm keen to expose a bit of that on today's panel and ask you, what have been some of the stumbling blocks for each of you that you've experienced in what we've been speaking about today that can make the audience members feel a bit reassured that don't worry, there are challenges that we're all experiencing in this space. So Kate, I wonder if I could come back to add a bit of additional flavour on to what you were mentioning before.
Yeah, and I think for us, as for many, I'm sure it's all about incremental step changes, as is often the case in data generally, and trying to move the easier bits, relatively speaking, first. So, are there other data repositories that have a similar need? Because there might be a different region, but operating the same product, so the data might be very similar, would present an obvious sort of relatively easier opportunity to go after and centralize from a technology perspective. So what are the sort of more similar data opportunities that present earlier use cases to start to move, and then take a view down the line as to whether two potential products that might be very different in their offering are actually ever going to make sense in one platform, or whether actually that's the case where you are more hybrid in the operation. That's the sort of technology perspective. The other, as I mentioned earlier, is the people and culture perspective, and whether or not the policies, the processes, even the organizational structures of some of the teams support an earlier or a later move in practice to operating off a central data platform and a centralized tool set. And that will come down to the maturity of those specific teams, the specific tools and technologies that they already use. If they're already similar, that makes it easier. So I think it is a bit of a multi-piece puzzle. But what is key is that you break it down and put each piece in at a turn, rather than it's a brave person, I think, who would try and do it all at once. That's how we do it, is very much incrementally.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose that then links nicely into kind of the business strategy as well, because there's going to be some things that are going to be quick wins, gain value, as you mentioned, get the buy-in, but also kind of move towards the strategy. But there's going to be potentially bigger, harder projects as well that are going to have real big challenges and opportunities towards that business strategy as well, but really kind of understanding it. I know I often speak about the fact that the data space is such an exciting one, is you can do quite a lot. So it's a case of making sure you are prioritizing, because just to echo what you said there, Kate, I think it is a brave person that decides to do it all on day one, for sure. Juan, how about yourself when it comes to stumbling blocks that you have experienced with what we're chatting about today?
Well, I'll give you, as Kate said, there's probably many. I'll give you a particular one, which has happened to me. When you're talking about the centralized or almost centralized data platform, this means you have to move data from applications to some sort of data lake, data warehouse. And that means to make that data available for the business, you have to understand and replicate the original application's data logic, which is not a simple thing to do, right? So the operational database behind the application is normally very normalized. It will be comprised of many tables and many queries which you cannot see, right? But the application will display you a nice set of data you can use. However, if you query the data behind it, you will have to bring the raw tables to your data lake and then create something that replicates a bit what the application is doing, maybe at larger scale, so they can be used for analytics. So maybe the application just shows you one line when in reality you need all the 100,000 lines that you have available. But it means you have to replicate those queries, that business logic into your data lake or data warehouse, and that is a difficult thing to do. So my advice here would be get the business involved early on and make sure they allocate sufficient time for you to explain and to help your data engineers and your data team to move that data around, because it's not just as simple as querying the data and copying the tables. You have a lot of business logic to replicate, and it won't be easy. And we've been through this journey where we've provided the data over and over and over, and it was never correct. It was never correct because the dates that we thought were not the right ones. We were querying a field that we thought it was the right one, but it was not, because it's not the last updated field, blah, 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 and like this, a million things. So my advice would be, or my experience with the stumbling, get the business involved. You cannot do it for them entirely. You need them to be part of a team. If working like in an agile fashion, then make sure you have somebody from business in the team from the beginning, can give you direction and can save you a lot of headaches, and avoid presenting wrong things again and again, which also diminishes a bit the trust that the business people have in your product. If they go check it and it's wrong, and there's not enough lines, or this the sum of this doesn't add up or whatever, then they will lose trust, and it was difficult to get it back. So that would be my experience.
No, really great points there. And it's that extension, right, of that education piece. And I think especially in this diverse world of the business function need to be thinking about what they do best, right? They're experts in that, and that's what they do for their day job. And there can be a lot of assumption work unless we go in and educate and bring them with us on that journey, because as you mentioned there, it could be that it feels like it could be quite a quick thing to do, and it may not be. So it's a case of us relaying that information about the process, what it will take, what resources it requires, and setting those expectations as well. Great, fantastic. Lindsay, when it comes to stumbling blocks, what have you experienced?
Yeah, I think the key main stumbling blocks that I'm facing into at the moment are around the additional restrictions we have about security classifications. We face additional challenges once we start looking at secret levels of security classification, but also the pure scale of the environment that we're operating in. So as we've spoken about, the focus for us is getting the foundations right, starting small, finding those quick wins, and then trying to scale. And we've got a lot of great foundations in place in pockets of the organisation, and because of the model that we're operating, we're trying not to rewrite the rule book where we've already got rules, policies, standards, tools in place. So we're trying to take those learnings and adopt them and standardize those for adoption throughout the broader organization. And I think, I've referred already about, the focus initially on the kind of laying the foundations for data governance, but that's with a view of enablement, as opposed to, I think Kate was referring to, that sweet spot, and not about being bound by kind of rules and restrictions. It's providing the foundations to enable the organization to access and find and utilize the data that they need for those strategic decisions. So we're very much there to kind of help. So we're wanting to talk to the business to understand where the problems are, where the priorities are, and that's how we're trying to scale. We're working with early adopters first of all, where we think the real value can be added, with a view that then we can build out and scale.
Amazing. I love this evolution that data governance has been on as a function and as a support, that it is a case of enablement, not a case of restricting it. In fact, the first ever episode we aired of the Business of Data podcast was titled "Data Governance Isn't a Dirty Word." And I stand by that. And I think it's something that leaders are still grappling with and working with, and making sure that it is that enablement language that's being used, as opposed to, can't do this, don't do that, follow the rule book as well. Jason, how about you? What have been some of the stumbling blocks that you've witnessed?
Yeah, I think we can risk falling into the trap of focusing on a single element of the strategy. So I think it's important that whatever we do, we look at systems, people, process, and indeed data, and look at that all as one entity rather than individuals, and then make sure that we've got a strong change management program around that, because often what we think is simple, it gets tripped up as it goes through the organization, especially if we don't consider it as in a holistic form. The other thing, building on your enablement language, and is we have to find that right balance between security and socialization of data. And maybe controversially, I dream of the time where we're excluded data by exception rather than by default. I'm sure if we took our security heads off, and I know we can't, but if we did that and said everyone had access to all of the data, there would be huge innovation about what we could do linking up these different data sets together. So how do we manage that balance?
Yeah, and it was a big challenge. In fact, we're definitely covering it in other sessions of the festival today, of that security and risk versus innovation. So it's certainly something that many people are grappling with. So we're with you on that journey for certain, Jason. Andy, round us out on this question. Then, what have been some of the challenges that you have been experiencing?
Sure. I think we sort of sidestepped some of our major challenges in that we were quite fortunate that we were going down the path of looking for a data virtualization technology or operating model change, and we came across what a data mesh was, and so it all seemed to really align for us. Whereas if we were starting now, I imagine it'd be far more difficult. So we definitely sidestepped some of our stumbling blocks there, but it's certainly not easy. As Kate said, I think you need to get up and running. Like, start simply, don't try to bite off everything at once. And what we found to be a struggle at times is trying to get some of the more strategic work done by teams that are overloaded with tactical work that they need to get done. So they're trying to blend roadmaps and trying to beg and borrow resources to get things done. So yeah, it's always a negotiation from that sense.
Amazing. Now, I've got the team behind telling me we've got about 5 minutes left, which means we can each take a minute. I would love you to impart your advice to the audience based on the journey you've been on, based on what we've spoken about today and what you've heard from your fellow panelists. What would be your biggest piece of advice that you'd like to give today? Jason, I'll go to you first.
Okay, so what I would say is collaboration is key between the different business functions and IT. None of us have all the answers, so that collaboration is critical. And healthy debate and challenge up front. Delivering roadmaps is, I think, is the best framework then. But recognise that a framework is just that, and we always need to be agile and able to pivot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jason. Andy, what's your big piece of advice?
Yeah, be agile. Like, proof of concept. Try experiments. Definitely start small with where you're trying to go, and without sounding like a teacher, I'd also encourage people to do their homework. There's lots of resources out there that are available, so definitely a plug for the Business and Data podcast and this festival. But there's lots of useful groups on LinkedIn. There's communities that are working within data mesh, and there's other communities that are working, and they're very actively participating. So you can get in there, ask questions, and learn the lessons that others have learned themselves.
Oh, I love that, Andy. Thank you. And as someone who literally has the word community in her job title, I completely agree with really getting involved with others in other forums, etc., to really understand what's going on for people. So thank you so much for that. Juan, how about yourself? Biggest piece of advice?
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with what Jason and Andy said. All those things are key. I would maybe add one to the finding, being agile and strategic projects and so on. Find something simple. Maybe it's not the most important thing. Maybe it's not the thing that will add the most value, but make it easy at the beginning. Else you risk failing, and that would set you back for a few months. Because again, as I mentioned before, one of our currency as corporate data leaders, one of our currency is business trust. We need that to work. If business loses trust in you and they feel like you're robbing time from them, but you're not delivering on any value, that will get difficult and more difficult for you. So find something visual, find something simple, that at the same time adds of course value, but it doesn't have to be the thing that is most important. There has to be a balance between simplicity and values, so you can show it off, and that really helps. Even though it's a bit could seem a bit like okay, but why you're doing this is not the most important, but it really helps if you can gain that currency. That will help you and then steal in a way more time from your business partners that have to dedicate enough time, effort, and resources to create the things that you need to construct with them.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you, Juan. Kate, big piece of advice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's when making the decision whether to decentralize, centralize, go hybrid, it's about thinking about the end business need and the likely efficiencies that will create. We should never do it just for the sake of doing it. It's really key that we understand why, in the context of the business strategy, any cost savings, revenue materialization opportunities, why we would do that, and therefore what the right decision is and which direction you would go in.
Amazing, thank you. And then last but certainly not least, Lindsay.
For me, I think, well, to echo first of all what everybody else has been saying, I think it's about collaboration, communication. I think the big thing for me is partnerships, whether the partnerships be with industry experts or whether they be internal to the organisation that you're working in. For me, the partnership piece is the key, and where I've learned and gained a lot of value without the need for me to actually figure all this out. You know, the partnerships, you can learn from other people's mistakes, but also their wins as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you to each of you for joining me today. It was a really insightful discussion. Obviously, having so many different perspectives on the panel, I think made for a really rich conversation. So thank you so much for that. Now, if you didn't have a chance to ask your question because you're still digesting the information, then please do make sure you connect with all of our speakers and guests today on LinkedIn. You can also direct message them during the event within the platform. It's on the right-hand side of your screen. Please do that. We're going to be moving on very soon to an interview, but just before we do that, you will have a minute or two to quickly check out the platform, and you can go into the resource area to check out those additional resources that hopefully can help you on your journey. But thank you to each of the panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.